Almost every gardener has a spot they have quietly given up on. Too shady, not worth planting, and so it sits there, season after season, growing nothing. Stacey Murphy spent years testing exactly what happens in that spot. She grew the same cabbage patch, half in sun and half in shade, and measured the difference. She did the same with arugula. And what she found is that shady ground is not unusable. It is just different. Different crops, different timelines, different expectations. Here is exactly how to use it.
Now, the other thing is that, and I'll even add more to that, is that the cabbage that was in the shade, it took 8 weeks longer to come in than the cabbage that grew in the sunlight area. So this cabbage had a 60-day time from the moment when I transplanted it till the time it was supposed to be harvested. Its days to maturity was 60 days. And the cabbage that was in the sun came out of the ground in 60 days. But the cabbage that was in the shade took double that time. So that's a significant amount of time that a crop is in the ground.
This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, where Stacey Murphy shares the results of her own shade growing tests and exactly which crops work in 4 to 6 hours of sun. For more information, free resources, and gentle guidance, you can find us at growyourownvegetables.org. And to grow alongside other gardeners just like you, join our free community at gyov.org.
This question was about growing in shade, and I got a couple different people saying we have some shady area and we're not sure if we have any sunlight areas, and this might be all we have. What can we do? And then I had some people say, I have some shade and I have some sunlight. What can I do in the shady area? So this is for everybody, regardless of your growing zone. This is for everybody. So the first thing to think about when you're thinking about growing in 4 to 6 hours of sunlight or even less is that not all shade is created equal. If you have a building throwing a dark shadow that is relentless on your site, it's not dappled light, it's just a complete shadow, then you're just getting no sunlight whatsoever. But if you have a tree above you and you're getting dappled light and in the wind the leaves are moving and you're getting some light coming through, then that's a different kind of shade, and you're actually getting more sun than you maybe realize. So that's the first thing to double check is, dappled light is a lot better than complete shade. And then what I say to everybody is that the first thing you need to do when you're thinking about growing in 4 to 6 hours of sunlight is to adjust your expectations. So I've grown quite a bit in shade in Brooklyn, and I have this shady spot, and I always run different tests on it. And so here's what I found over time, and this is useful to just adjust your expectations.
This is the first check, and most people skip it. Dappled light through leaves is a completely different growing environment from the solid shadow of a wall. Go and stand in your spot at midday before you decide anything.
So here you can see that there is some shade around this cabbage, and a little bit off camera is even more shade, and that's where I'm growing some arugula and some lettuce. So take a look at that area of cabbage. Was a complete patch of cabbage. It was wall-to-wall cabbage. Now look which heads I harvested and which heads I haven't harvested. The area that's in sunlight, all the cabbage heads came out of the ground much sooner than the ones in the shade. Now, the other thing is that, and I'll even add more to that, is that the cabbage that was in the shade, it took 8 weeks longer to come in than the cabbage that grew in the sunlight area. So this cabbage had a 60-day time from the moment when I transplanted it till the time it was supposed to be harvested. Its days to maturity was 60 days. And the cabbage that was in the sun came out of the ground in 60 days. But the cabbage that was in the shade took double that time. So that's a significant amount of time that a crop is in the ground. So that's a huge shift in your expectation, right? 4 weeks or 4 months is so much different than 2 months in the ground. Now, I could have harvested them sooner than that, but they just were so small, it just didn't make sense. So I kept leaving them in the ground, waiting for them to get bigger. And the other thing I noticed is that the cabbage heads that were in the shade versus the cabbage heads in the sun were about half the yield. So if you are getting, a 2-pound head of cabbage or a 3-pound head of cabbage, the one that you pull out of the shade is going to be half of that. And that's just the way it goes, because it's less fun, it's less photosynthesis, everything is slower and everything is smaller.
This is the number that changes how you plant. Not a rough estimate, a direct side-by-side comparison. In shade, a 60-day crop can become a 120-day crop and still come out half the size. That is not a reason to give up. It is a reason to choose different crops.
Smaller. Now, the other one that I grew was this arugula and this lettuce. And so in the shade, the interesting thing about the difference of these two crops is that arugula has a much shorter days to maturity. It's more like 45, and you can clip it even sooner than 45 days if you want to, as baby arugula. And so because it's a shorter maturing crop, it wasn't as bad as the doubled time to maturity. So I waited an extra week, and I ended up getting about half the yield that I normally get. And normally I get in that 6-foot square area. I normally get in between 1.5 pounds and 3 pounds of arugula the first harvest. And then basically when I harvested it in the shade, it was half that in weight. Now, when we talk about planting schedules and planting yields, we'll get into more detail in Module 4, but just for now, recognize that the number of weeks that you wait for those crops in the shade is going to extend. And in the case of longer maturing crops, it extends more because it's longer time to mature. And in short, so I would recommend picking shorter time frame maturing crops rather than longer term maturing crops. So
this is the principle that makes shade growing work. Short crops barely notice. Long crops suffer badly. Stop trying to grow cabbage in your shady corner and start growing cut and come again greens there instead.
Maturing crops. So let's get into that a little bit more. So 2 things before we get into what types of plants. The first is, can you change your environment slightly? So can you paint any nearby surfaces white, any of the walls, and try to increase reflection into that shady spot? That's one way to think about it. And can you prune some of those trees back in order to pick up more sunlight? That would be another helpful way to go. If you need to grow in containers as a way to move them into the sun and then perhaps move them back into the shade, that might be another way to go. But a lot of people, I think, are putting in real planting beds. They're putting in planting beds that are there to stay and not necessarily using containers, so that might not be useful for people. So what kind of crops should you grow in that 4 to 6 hours of shade? I say stick to leafy and root vegetables, and transplants are best in order to give plants a head start because they're already starting a little bit behind when they're in the shade. So these are some of the crops, and you'll notice most of them are leafy greens or root crops. And all of them work in the shade, and they have varying number of hours that they need. So I'll go into that in just a second. The first thing I want to note is that you may opt to germinate seeds right into the soil if it's in the shade. Let's say you're growing a bed of arugula and you want to broadcast a whole bunch of seed. You don't want to transplant. You just want to throw down, a lot of seed and grow in a lot of vegetables. You can throw those seeds down and they will germinate because germination doesn't need sunlight. And so you'll find that the germination rate of that area might be almost the same as anywhere else in your garden because the seeds at that point don't need sunlight. You might find that it's a slightly slower germination rate because the soil might be a little bit cooler because it doesn't have sun directly on it. But generally the germination rate will be about the same. You'll be really excited because the germination happened just like it said it would. But that's where things start to slow down. There's like a critical point where these little baby greens, they're these little tiny leaves, need to start photosynthesizing. And if they don't get light, they have a hard time becoming fully mature. And so what I found is that transplants do better. But because I like to grow a lot of leafy lettuce mixes and arugula mixes, I do go for the germination. So I end up planting a lot more than I normally would in order to account for that failure that's going to happen. So sometimes I'll lay down twice as much seed as I normally would in a place that gets shade, knowing that half of those seeds, when they germinate, they're just not going to get enough sunlight.
This is why so many people conclude shade growing does not work. The seeds come up beautifully, and then nothing happens. Germination was never the problem. What comes next is sow double or transplant.
Sunlight. So a couple of notes on crops. So this is a really great chart that I use. This came from Mother Earth News. I love this chart, and it talks about the number of hours per day that different greens need. And you can see here that some of them are okay in 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 5 hours. And it sort of depends. Like chard, if you really want large chard with large stalks, they need at least 5 hours of sun. But if you're just harvesting the baby leaves, then you could do 3 to 4 hours of sun per day, and it's still going to grow in.
Screenshot this. Leafy greens and root crops. And notice the chard point. The same crop has 2 different light requirements depending on what size you want to harvest it at. That flexibility is what makes shade growing workable.
Going to grow in. So this chart helps you understand exact number of hours for some of these leafy greens and how to make them work. And note that root crops, they do rely on some photosynthesis, but because most of their growth is underground, this is why they can handle this partial shade as well. So, and those root crops are going to be slower growing, and they might be smaller in yield, but they will grow. So this is a really great reference.
Think about where you were at the start of this video. A shady corner written off, bare ground doing nothing. Now look at what you know. Dappled light gives you far more usable sun than a solid building shadow. Go and check which one you have. In shade, a 60-day cabbage becomes a 120-day cabbage at half the weight. But a 45-day arugula needs only 1 extra week. So choose short-maturing crops, leafy greens and root vegetables. Harvest young rather than waiting for full size. Paint nearby walls white to bounce light back in. Prune the canopy if you can. Use transplants where possible. And if you are broadcasting seed, sow twice as much, because germination will work beautifully and then half of them will stall. That corner was never unusable, it was just waiting for the right crop. You are not the gardener who writes off the shady corner anymore. You are the one who checks whether it is dappled or solid, who plants short-maturing greens there instead, who sows twice as thick and harvests young. If you want to keep learning from Stacey Murphy, join our free community of growers at gyov.org. This Q&A was recorded at a past Grow Your Own Vegetables event, and what Stacey just shared with you took her years of growing, failing, and figuring out to discover. Now imagine sitting down with 15 experts, exactly like her. 15 of the most respected gardeners, herbalists, and soil scientists on the planet, each sharing the single most powerful lesson they know, the insight that changed everything about how they grow food, the thing they wish someone had told them at the beginning. Clinical herbalists who can turn your garden into a medicine cabinet, soil scientists who will change how you see every handful of dirt, food growers who have fed entire communities from a backyard. All of it waiting for you right now, completely free at the Superfood Garden Summit. Go to growyourownvegetables.org/summit, register in 30 seconds, and start watching immediately.